The first time I heard my daughter call herself their real parent out loud, I didn't even react the way you'd think. I was standing in the community center hallway in Richmond, still wearing my coat, still smelling like the chicken broth I'd left simmering too long because I'd rushed out the door. My hands were full: paper plates, a foil tray of cookies, a gift bag with a name written in curling marker. I'd come early like I always did, because the little things always needed doing before anyone arrived. And then I heard her laugh. Marissa's laugh, bright and easy, like life hadn't ever asked her to carry anything heavy. "Oh, you know me," she said to a cluster of parents near the bulletin board. "I'm basically a single mom. I did it all with these two." I felt something in my chest fold in on itself. Not a dramatic breaking, just a small, quiet collapse. Like a chair leg giving out after years of holding the same weight. If you're watching this from somewhere far away, tell me where you're listening from. Sometimes it helps to know I'm not the only one sitting with a memory that still stings. And if you've ever been the person who did the work without the credit, just tap like, subscribe if you want to stay with me a little longer. This story isn't loud, but it's real. Because the truth is, I was a single mother once. I knew what doing it all actually looked like. I knew what it cost. And in that hallway, with Marissa's voice floating over my head like a ribbon someone else got to cut, I realized I'd been letting myself disappear for years. I'm 72 now. My knees complain when the weather shifts, and my hands aren't as steady when I thread a needle. But back then, when this started, I was still strong in that quiet, working way. The kind of strong that doesn't show up in photographs. It began after Marissa's marriage fell apart. She'd married young, full of stubborn hope. Derek was charming in the beginning. Good hair, good smile, big plans that never quite landed. When the twins came, Liam first, then Sophie 10 minutes later, Marissa was glowing with that new mother pride. For a while, it looked like they might make it. Then real life pressed its thumb into the soft part of things. Derek lost one job, then another. Marissa got tired. They argued in whispers at first, then in the open. One night she showed up on my porch with 2 diaper bags, a stroller that wobbled, and eyes that looked hollowed out. "Just for a little while," she said, like she was trying to convince herself more than me. I remember the smell of rain on her hair. I remember Sophie's fist gripping Marissa's shirt like she was afraid to be set down. Liam had a red mark on his cheek from falling asleep against the car seat buckle. He blinked at me, solemn as an old man. I took them in. Of course I did. At the time, I told myself it was temporary. That Marissa would rest, find her footing, and then take her babies back into a stable life. What I didn't understand is how easy it is for temporary to become a whole decade if you're not careful. Especially when love makes you flexible. My house became their house. Overnight, the quiet of my mornings turned into cartoons, spilled cereal, tiny socks migrating into corners like lost birds. My grocery list doubled. My laundry baskets never emptied. The bathroom mirror was soon freckled with toothpaste. I learned the rhythm of raising children all over again, except this time my back ached and my patience had to be measured like medicine. School runs came first. I'd wake before dawn, pack lunches, peanut butter if Liam had his way, turkey if Sophie insisted she was tired of baby food, even though she was 6. I'd tie shoelaces, hunt for missing library books, sign permission slips with a pen that always seemed to be running out of ink. At night, when the world got quiet, I'd sit at the kitchen table paying bills under the yellow light above the stove. The house would smell like dish soap and fabric softener. Sometimes I'd hold Marissa's old coffee mug just to feel something warm in my hands. Marissa. She was around. Just not in the way you think. Some weeks she'd sweep in with new shoes, a fresh hairstyle, A big bag from a store I never shopped at. She'd kiss the twins' foreheads, take a few pictures, promise a zoo trip, and leave before bedtime like sleep schedules were someone else's problem. Other weeks, she'd disappear completely. No calls, no visits, no explanation that made sense. When she did call, she always sounded rushed, like her life was a moving train and she was trying to talk over the noise. "Mom, I'm working so hard," she'd say. "You know I'm doing this for them." And I would nod even though she couldn't see me, because arguing felt like dropping a match near gasoline. I didn't want to burn what little connection she still offered. I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit as long as Liam and Sophie were okay. But that's the lie caretakers tell themselves when they're afraid of what the truth might cost. Because the children notice. They notice everything. Not in the way adults do, with labels and judgments, but in small, sharp observations. When Sophie was 7, she asked me one night while I was braiding her hair after a bath, "Grandma, why doesn't Mom ever know where my pajamas are?" I paused, fingers caught in her damp hair. The bathroom smelled like lavender soap. The hallway nightlight threw a soft line across the floor. "She's busy," I said gently. Sophie looked at me in the mirror. Her eyes were my eyes. Same shape, same questioning tilt. "So are you," she said. And I didn't have an answer for that. Liam, quieter, kept his questions inside. But I'd find them in his actions. The way he'd bring me his school papers first, the way he'd look for my face in the crowd at assemblies, the way he'd sit close to me on the couch like he needed to anchor himself. Marissa didn't see those details. Or if she did, she didn't understand what they meant. And then came the first time the world praised her for what I had been doing. It wasn't even a big thing. Just a post on social media. A photo of Liam and Sophie in matching outfits I had bought, standing on my front porch in the morning light. Their hair was neat because I'd done it. Their cheeks were clean because I'd wiped them. Their backpacks were packed because I'd stayed up the night before making sure homework was finished. Marissa posted it with a caption that read, "So proud of my babies. Being a mom is the hardest job, but I wouldn't trade it for anything." The comments poured in. Hearts, clapping hands, praise. "You're such an amazing mother. They're lucky to have you. Super mom." I stared at the screen until my eyes watered, not from tears exactly, but from something like strain. Like my body was trying to focus on a truth it had avoided. That night, I folded laundry in silence. Sophie's little socks. Liam's school shirts. My own old nightgowns with the thinning fabric at the elbows. I remember thinking, very quietly, if she's the mother in their story, what am I? And that question, once it entered my mind, didn't leave. The thing about being the one in the background is that you learn how to make yourself small without anyone ever asking you to. I didn't confront Marissa about the post. I didn't call her out or leave a comment correcting the record. I told myself it would be petty. I told myself it would confuse the children. Mostly, I told myself I was being mature. But underneath all that was fear. Fear that if I said the wrong thing, she'd pull away completely, and the children would pay the price. So I stayed quiet. Again. Life went on the way it always had. Mornings began with the scrape of chairs on the kitchen floor and the hum of the kettle. Afternoons were homework battles and snacks that somehow vanished faster than I could replace them. Evenings were baths, stories, and the soft thump of little feet finally settling into sleep upstairs. Marissa drifted in and out like a relative visitor instead of a parent. She knew their birthdays, of course. She brought gifts, sometimes thoughtful, sometimes wildly impractical. A drone Liam was too young to fly. Shoes Sophie loved but couldn't wear to school. She meant well, I think. Or at least she wanted to mean well. At school, the teachers assumed she was the one doing the daily work. When permission slips came home addressed to Mom, Sophie handed them to me without comment. I signed them with my own name anyway, even though no one ever seemed to notice. One afternoon, during a parent-teacher conference, I sat across from Mrs. Alvarez while Liam colored quietly at a small table in the corner. The classroom smelled like crayons and disinfectant wipes. "You're doing a wonderful job," Mrs. Alvarez said warmly. "Liam is so well adjusted. It really shows the effort you put in as a mother." I smiled automatically, thanked her, corrected nothing. On the drive home, the radio played softly, some old song I used to hum when Marissa was little. Liam watched the world pass by, his reflection flickering in the window. "Mrs. Alvarez thinks you're my mom," he said suddenly. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Well," I said carefully, "she knows I take care of you." He thought about that. "But you're my grandma." "Yes. So why doesn't Mom do the school stuff?" The question landed gently, but it stayed. "I chose my words the way you do when walking across ice. Everyone helps in different ways," I said. Liam nodded, accepting the answer because children trust the people who tuck them in at night. That trust was both a gift and a burden. If you're listening and you've ever been the person holding everything together quietly, tell me, what do you do for a living? Sometimes our jobs say more about us than our titles ever do. The years passed in increments so small I didn't notice them until they stacked up. Sophie lost her first tooth in my kitchen. Liam learned to ride a bike in the cul-de-sac while I jogged behind him, breathless and laughing. Their report cards, scraped knees, bedtime fears, all of it lived with me. Marissa, meanwhile, reinvented herself. New job titles. New social circles. She spoke often about balance and self-care, about how hard it was to be a mother in today's world. When she talked, people listened. She had that way about her. Confidence without details. At family gatherings, she told stories about raising twins, about sleepless nights and sacrifices. She wasn't lying exactly. She just wasn't telling the whole truth. Once at Thanksgiving, my sister leaned toward me while Marissa held court at the table. "You must be so proud of her," she whispered. "She's such a devoted mom." I nodded, passed the gravy, swallowed the words that rose like bile. The breaking point didn't come with shouting or accusations. It came quietly, like most things in my life. Sophie was 10 when she was assigned a school project called My Hero. Parents were invited to the presentation. I helped her glue photos to poster board, helped her practice her speech at the kitchen table while spaghetti cooled on the stove. She hesitated one night, chewing on her pencil. "Can my hero be two people?" she asked. "Of course," I said. She smiled, relieved. Good. On presentation day, the classroom buzzed with parents and grandparents. Marissa arrived late, slipping into a seat near the back, phone still in her hand. When it was Sophie's turn, she stood tall, her voice steady. "My heroes are my mom and my grandma," she began. I felt my chest warm. She talked about Marissa first, how she worked hard, how she loved them. Then she turned slightly, eyes finding mine. "And my grandma," she said, "is the one who makes my lunches, helps me with homework, and stays up when I'm sick. She's always there." The room was quiet. Not dramatic. Just attentive. Afterward, parents smiled at me. A few nodded with something like understanding. Marissa hugged Sophie tightly, her smile stretched just a little too thin. In the car later, Marissa was silent. That night, after the children were asleep, She finally spoke. "You didn't have to let her say all that," she said. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in years, I didn't rush to soften my response. "She told the truth," I said quietly. Something shifted then. Not exploded. Shifted. And I knew I couldn't keep pretending forever. After that night, the house felt different. Not colder, just more honest. Like a window had been opened somewhere, letting in air we'd all been avoiding. Marissa didn't pull away the way I'd feared. Instead, she became careful. Polite. She thanked me more often, asked before changing plans. On the surface, it looked like progress. But underneath it, something brittle had formed. I noticed it in the way she corrected the children in public. "If you need something, ask me," she'd say quickly, her voice too bright. Or, "Tell your teachers I'm the one to call." At first I complied. Old habits are loyal things. But small moments kept piling up, little fractures that widened each time I stepped aside. One afternoon, I picked Sophie up from school because Marissa forgot. Again. Sophie climbed into the car quietly, backpack on her lap. "She said she was coming," Sophie murmured, staring at the dashboard. "I know," I said. Sophie sighed the way only children who've learned disappointment can. "It's okay. You always do." That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the same place where so much of my life had unfolded. The clock ticked loudly. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and warm wood. I thought about all the things I'd let slide. All the times I'd said, "It's fine." All the times I'd told myself love meant erasing myself. And for the first time, I asked a question I'd avoided for years. What does this teach them? Because one day, Liam would grow up and decide what kind of father he'd be. Sophie would grow up and decide what kind of mother she could become. What story were they learning about who does the work and who gets the credit? The first real action I took wasn't loud. It was administrative. I updated the school records. Put my name as primary contact, with Marissa listed as secondary. I informed the pediatrician's office who handled appointments and follow-ups. I stopped redirecting praise. When teachers thanked me, I said, "I'm glad it shows." When neighbors commented on the kids' behavior, I smiled and said, "We work hard." Marissa noticed. "People are starting to think you're their mom," she said one evening, arms crossed in the doorway. "I'm their grandmother," I replied calmly. "Who raises them?" She flinched like I'd slapped her. "That's not fair." "No," I said, meeting her eyes. "It's accurate." The confrontation we'd both avoided finally arrived one rainy Sunday afternoon. The kids were at a friend's house. The house was too quiet. Marissa paced the living room, her footsteps sharp on the hardwood. "You're making me look bad," she said. I folded laundry slowly, deliberately. "I'm telling the truth. You're undermining me." "I'm existing," I said. "There's a difference." Her voice cracked then, the polish finally slipping. "You think I wanted it to be like this? You think I don't feel guilty?" I paused, looked at her, saw my daughter again, not the confident woman, not the admired mother, but the scared girl who once showed up on my porch with 2 babies and nowhere else to go. "I know you feel guilty," I said softly. "But guilt doesn't raise children. Presence does." She sank onto the couch, head in her hands. "I didn't know how to do both," she whispered. "Be a mother and be myself." I sat across from her. "Neither did I," said. "But I did it anyway." The truth became public not through scandal, but through time. At a school awards ceremony, Liam was recognized for academic improvement. The principal called my name as his guardian. I stood. Applause filled the room. Marissa clapped too. Slowly. Her face unreadable. At Sophie's choir concert, the program listed me as caregiver. Marissa didn't correct it. Words spread gently. The way truths do when they're allowed to breathe. People stopped praising Marissa alone. They started acknowledging the village. And in that shift, something unexpected happened. The children relaxed. Liam stopped hesitating before calling my name. Sophie stopped glancing at her mother for permission before hugging me in public. Their world felt steadier because the lines were finally clear. Healing didn't mean Marissa vanished. It meant boundaries. She became more present, really present, or she didn't come at all. The children learned consistency. So did she. Years later, when Liam graduated high school, he thanked me in his speech. Just one sentence. Simple. True. I wouldn't be here without my grandma, he said. I didn't look at Marissa. I didn't need to. Because by then, I knew something important. Claiming your truth doesn't steal someone else's. It just stops erasing your own. By the time the children reached their teenage years, the house had settled into a rhythm that felt earned. Not perfect. Just honest. Teenagers don't let you pretend. They ask direct questions. They notice inconsistencies. They call out silence. Sophie grew taller than me at 14. She started borrowing my sweaters, stretching the sleeves, leaving the faint smell of her shampoo behind. Liam's voice deepened so suddenly it startled us both. He began staying up late, reading quietly at the table while I pretended not to notice the way his shoulders hunched with worry he didn't yet have words for. Marissa had moved into a small apartment across town by then. She came by regularly. Dinners, birthdays, the occasional school event. But she no longer spoke over me. She no longer corrected the children when they called me first. Something in her had shifted too. Not healed entirely, but softened. One evening, while I was washing dishes and Sophie dried them beside me, she said, "You know everyone at school thinks you're my mom, right?" I smiled faintly. "Do they?" "Yeah," she said. "I correct them sometimes. But not always." I glanced at her. "Why not?" She shrugged. "Because it doesn't feel wrong." The words landed gently, but they stayed with me. Later that night, Liam sat at the table, elbows spread wide, working through a math problem that clearly wasn't cooperating. "Grandma," he said without looking up, "is it bad that I get mad at Mom sometimes?" "No," I said. "It's human." He nodded. "I don't hate her. I just don't trust her the same way." Trust. Such a fragile thing. Built slowly. Broken quickly. Rebuilt only with time and truth. That was when I realized something else I'd been avoiding. My silence hadn't protected the children nearly as much as I'd believed. They'd simply learned to navigate around it. If you're listening and you've ever stayed quiet to keep the peace, ask yourself, who paid the price for that silence? The moment everything finally came into the open happened at a family gathering I hadn't wanted to attend. Marissa insisted. Said it would be good for all of us. We gathered at my brother's house, a warm place filled with noise and opinions. Cousins, aunts, neighbors. The kind of gathering where stories get told and retold until they harden into history. Someone asked Marissa how she managed twins on her own for so many years. She hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. Then she said, clearly, "I didn't. My mom raised them." The room stilled. Not awkward, just attentive. She continued, voice steady. I was there, but she was the one who showed up every day. I took the credit for a long time. That wasn't fair. I felt my throat tighten. My hands trembled slightly in my lap. No one clapped. No one interrupted. But the air shifted. Later, Marissa found me alone on the back porch. "I'm sorry," she said. "No explanations. No justifications." I nodded. "Thank you." It wasn't forgiveness yet. It was acknowledgement. And sometimes, that's the first real kindness. From then on, the story stopped being confusing. The children grew into adults who understood nuance, that love can be messy, that people can fail without being monsters, that truth doesn't have to be cruel to be firm. I didn't need a title. I had a legacy. Years later, when Sophie introduced me at her college graduation dinner, she said, "This is my grandma. She raised us." No bitterness. No drama. Just fact. Now, in the quiet of my home, with the twins grown and the house finally still again, I sit with the weight of all those years. The lunches. The nights. The moments no one applauded. And I know this. Motherhood isn't who gets praised. It's who stays. When the house emptied out for good, the silence startled me. I'd imagined I'd welcome it. Sleeping in, fewer dishes, no backpacks slumped by the door. But the first morning after Sophie moved into her apartment and Liam left for his job out of state, I stood in the kitchen unsure what to do with my hands. The kettle whistled out of habit. I poured the water anyway. Let the steam warm my face. The mug felt too light. People talk about the ache of letting children go. They don't always talk about the confusion that follows when your purpose has been so clearly defined for so long. I had spent years measuring my days in other people's needs. Without them, time stretched oddly, like fabric pulled too thin. Marissa called more often then. Not out of guilt. I think that season had passed, but out of something closer to respect. "How are you holding up?" she asked one afternoon. "I'm learning how to be quiet again," I said. She laughed softly. "You were never quiet." Maybe not. But I had been invisible. One Saturday, she came over with groceries and stayed long enough to cook. We moved around each other in the kitchen, careful but comfortable. She chopped onions. I stirred sauce. The old dance, but slower now. "I wish I'd said it sooner," she said suddenly. "Said what?" "That you raised them," she replied. Out loud. To everyone. I wiped my hands on a towel. "We both know what happened." "That's not the same," she said. Knowing and saying. She was right. Words matter. They shape memory. They decide who gets erased. I thought of all the women I'd known who carried families quietly. Sisters. Friends. Neighbors. Women whose names didn't make it into speeches or captions or thank you notes. I wondered how many of them were listening right now, nodding without realizing it. If you're one of them, if you did the work while someone else took the bow, know this. Your effort didn't disappear just because it went unacknowledged. It shaped lives anyway. That understanding didn't come all at once. Healing rarely does. It arrived in moments. Like the day Liam called to ask how to cook rice because it never tastes right when I do it. Or when Sophie showed up at my door crying after a hard week and said, "I just needed to be here." Or when Marissa, at a doctor's appointment of her own, listed me as her emergency contact without comment. Those moments stitched something back together inside me. I didn't need an apology tour. I didn't need public praise. I needed truth to live where denial once had. And slowly it did. At 72, I see things differently than I did at 60. Or 50. Or 40. Age has a way of sanding down the edges of old pain, not erasing it, but making it easier to hold. I can look back now without flinching. I see a woman who stepped in when it mattered, who made space, who chose steadiness over recognition. I see a daughter who failed and learned, who hid behind praise until she was strong enough to face herself. I see two children who grew up knowing they were loved, not perfectly, but consistently. That counts for something. The last time all four of us sat at the same table was my birthday. 72 candles felt excessive, so we used one tall one in the center of a cake Sophie baked herself. Marissa raised her glass. To my mom, she said, for raising my children when I couldn't, and for loving all of us anyway. No applause. Just clinking glasses. Quiet agreement. I closed my eyes for a moment before blowing out the candle, because for the first time, the story felt complete. Not tidy. Not painless. But honest. And honesty, I've learned, is the most durable thing we can leave behind. These days, my mornings are slower. I still wake early. Old habits don't disappear, but I no longer rush. I sit by the window with my tea and watch the light move across the street, the way it did years ago when backpacks waited by the door and lunches needed packing. Sometimes I think about how easily a life can be misunderstood if you're not the one telling the story. For a long time, I let someone else tell mine. I told myself it was love. And part of it was. But another part was fear. Fear of conflict. Fear of being seen as difficult. Fear of what would happen if I stepped out of the background and into the truth. What I know now is this. Silence doesn't always protect the people we think it does. Sometimes it just teaches them the wrong lesson. Liam and Sophie are grown now. They call me regularly. Not out of obligation, but habit. When something good happens, I'm one of the first people they tell. When something hard happens, I'm one of the first they call. That tells me more than any title ever could. Marissa and we're different now. Not closer in a simple way, but clearer. There are no performances between us anymore. No borrowed stories. Just two women who survived the same years from different angles. Occasionally she'll say, I don't know how you did it. And I always answer honestly, I didn't know either. I just did the next thing that needed doing. That's the quiet truth of caregiving, of motherhood, of love that doesn't ask permission or applause. If you're listening to this and you're in the middle of it right now, raising children who didn't come from your body, carrying responsibility that doesn't come with recognition, I want you to hear this clearly. What you're doing matters. Even if no one says it. Even if your name is missing. Time has a way of sorting stories out. Not loudly. Not all at once. But truth has patience. I don't regret raising my grandchildren. Not for a second. I regret only the years I pretended it didn't hurt to be invisible. If I could speak to my younger self, the woman standing in that hallway, holding paper plates while someone else claimed her life's work, I'd tell her this. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to name what you've done. And love does not require erasure. Thank you for sitting with me through this memory. If this story felt familiar, you're not alone. And if you want to stay for more stories like this, you know where the button is. So I'll leave you with the question that still visits me in quiet moments. If you were me, would you have made the same choice?